Let's jump to the record just a little bit, because, I mean, it's the Brothers Keeper Tour. The name of the album, very cool name for a record, because I think it's been on everybody's mind, and yet I've heard that phrase my whole life, you know. But it's so simple compared to some of your other titles of your records.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, it seems like, why did he name it that? And this is like so simple.
Well, we were just going to call it Songs, because I thought that would be a real funny joke, but then no one else thought that it was very funny.
Just Songs would have been the original title?
Yeah, because of all the other titles having been so long, and I thought, well, that would be funny just to call this Songs. That would be... But no one else got the joke, so we decided not to make a joke out of the title, and we called it Brothers Keeper. But we had some other interest. We thought about calling it Too Many Chiefs and Not Enough Native Americans, and, you know, kind of poking fun at whatever we could.
Welcome to a Ragamuffin Archive Revisited special presentation, celebrating the 30th anniversary of Brothers Keeper. I'm Joe Cook. As always, during this program, we'll dive deep into our archives and beyond to bring you some of the best rare recordings of Rich Mullins and a Ragamuffin band. And for this episode, we'll be taking an in-depth look at Rich Mullins' 8th studio album, Brothers Keeper, which was released 30 years ago today, on July 20th, 1995. Produced by Rich Mullins and the Ragamuffins, it would sadly turn out to be Rich's final album of new material to be released before his death in 1997. Often overlooked in his catalog, Brothers Keeper is a raw, heartfelt album that strips away polish in favor of intimate lyrics, organic instrumentation, and Rich Mullins' signature blend of vulnerability and spiritual depth. So during this special, we'll be featuring rare recordings of all the songs from the Brothers Keeper album. These performances come from various sources, including a radio broadcast, demos, concert recordings, and even 2 tracks from a tribute album that the Ragamuffins put out 10 years after the release of the original album. I'll be giving background info on the recordings that we play, and hopefully providing some extra context. But once again, joining me will be my good friend and Ragamuffin Archive team member, Chris Marchand. Chris is an author and podcaster, and he'll be taking a deeper look at the songs themselves and sharing some reflections throughout the show. Join us now as we celebrate an album that may have flown under the radar for some, but remains one of the most personal and quietly powerful works in Rich Mullins' legacy, Brothers Keeper. Well, hello, welcome to a very special edition of Ragamuffin Archive Revisited. This is our 30th anniversary celebration of the Rich Mullins album, Brothers Keeper. And on top of that, this is also my 100th episode of the Revisited podcast. So thank you so much for tuning in and for joining me for these 100 episodes. Anyway, for this special occasion, I am thrilled to be joined by my good friend Chris Marchand, and we're going to dive deep into the Brothers Keeper album. Chris, how's it going, man?
Oh man, it's been going. It's wonderful. I've spent a week listening to this cherished old album that I used to listen to nonstop.
You know, I really wanted to have you on as a co-host for this episode because, for one, you know, I just kind of love the way that you sort of dissect Rich's songs and kind of just really, you kind of help us look at them from a different light. But I thought it'd be really cool for you to come on this episode because you got to experience this album, Brothers Keeper, kind of in a different way than I got to. And by that, I mean, I didn't really know Rich until after he died. And so I didn't hear any of his records until after he died. And so my introduction was the Jesus record, though this was one of the first albums I bought. In fact, this may have been the first Rich Mullins record that I bought after the Jesus record. But by that point, he had already been gone for a year. The album was, I think, about 3 years old. You, on the other hand, got to experience this record the way it was intended, as a fan, as Rich Mullins' latest record, his new record. And so I just kind of wanted to ask you, like, what was that experience like for you? Do you have any memories of just, you know, going to the, you know, Christian bookstore and buying the Brothers Keeper album new?
I don't specifically remember the bookstore experience, but I would say that maybe you and I have somewhat of a similarity in this, that there's a way to look at this, that this was my first Rich Mullins album too. And what I mean by that is it was the first album that came out as I was a fan. So what I do have a memory of is buying the cassettes of The World as Best as I Remember It, in Liturgy, Legacy, but they were already a couple of years old at that point. And so as a preteen, early teenager, that's when I became a fan of Mullins. And so here I was, I had digested the now classic albums, especially Liturgy, Legacy. And this was the first album that came out when I was like, I'm a fan now. So it was the first one that was a new release. And so that, in that sense, it was very special.
So let me ask you about that, because that's kind of something that's sort of close to my heart, just the kind of idea of that, because, there are certainly a couple of records like that for me, from, when I was a teenager. The couple that come to mind are Billy Joel. I became a really big Billy Joel fan in the early 90s. And so then when River of Dreams came out, that was sort of like, a lot of people kind of like sort of disregard that album as being not one of his best. To me, it might be my favorite album purely from nostalgia. And the same thing for me with Paul McCartney. I became a Beatles fan around 94. The Beatles anthology came out. That was huge for me. The first Paul McCartney solo record to come out was Flaming Pie in 1997, after I became a fan. To this day, that is my favorite Paul McCartney record. And I don't know that objectively it's his best record, but it is my favorite. And so kind of what you're describing with this is very similar. So does that nostalgia sort of like influence how you view this record today, 30 years later?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that the paradox here is it was my first Rich Mullins record, and it's my last Rich Mullins record. And so as a fan, as a kid growing up, there's an element to it that's very unfair. It's like it's
oddly enough, that's the same thing with River of Dreams.
There you go. It's kind of it's a very similar thing.
Not as sad, but still very unsatisfying.
Hey, I just became a fan here. What are you doing? What do you mean you're not recording any more music? Or what did you have to go and die for? Right?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
like, come on. Come on. This is not fair. Now, of course, there is more Mullins, and I mean that's a whole thing. But yeah, there is a unsatisfying nature to the release of Brothers Keeper. And I would say this. You asked me, like, what do I think about nostalgia? It's funny because there's something about Brothers Keeper as the album that it was is, well, it was kind of the first true Ragamuffin band album too. And of course, it's in the title of the
Yeah.
Liturgy, Legacy, and the Ragamuffin Band, but it's a little bit different, right? It was kind of that was a merging of what Reed Arvin wanted with what Mullins wanted. Again, that's not a criticism for me. It's just that, like, I think maybe my perception is this is the first album where Mullins was taking off the training wheels. He was able to record the album he wanted to under his own vision, so to speak.
No, that's a really good point, because really, if we're honest, the Liturgy album is sort of a hybrid of sort of The World as Best I Remember It and Brothers Keeper. It's kind of in the middle there. This is for lack of a better term, this is a Ragamuffin Band album. It really is. I mean, they produced it. They have a co-producing credit with Rich on the record, if I'm not mistaken. And they were all, I think, with the exception of Mark Robertson, they this is the first album that Aaron played on. So you're a lot closer to what ended up being that core group that we sort of now know as a Ragamuffin Band. How did the album hit for you after Mullins died? Because that's another thing I didn't get to experience. And I've kind of thought about this a lot, especially in the last week. There was sort of this weird period in between Mullins' death and the Jesus record. And knowing your story, I know you were at Cornerstone in 98. Like, I think that was the first time they ever sold the Jesus record. It was made available at Cornerstone. You got to see them play some of the songs live. And so you're less than a year later, it's like maybe 10 months later, and you're at Cornerstone, and there is new Rich Mullins material. But prior to that, there had to be this point when you thought, wow, this is Rich Mullins' last album.
Yeah.
And so how did that record hit? Like, do you have any memory of just sort of thinking like, this is it, this is the last record? And did Did that sort of filter the way you looked at it? I know you're trying to dig back into 30-year-old memories here.
Yeah, right. I guess just to go to the music itself, and maybe this kind of relates to that period of thinking this is the last thing. Now, of course, there is the canticle as well that we could throw into the mix
And that is
there.
true.
I will say, just as a quick side note about the canticle, it didn't reach out and grab me and tug my heart as much. I mean, the songwriting just to me just didn't find me. It just didn't. I didn't connect with it in the same way. So it was a final work, but I don't know.
And for what it is, it's the soundtrack to a musical. Rich doesn't sing on the record. That is a, I mean, for what it is, that's a big deal. It's not a Rich Mullins record in the traditional sense.
Yeah.
But I mean, you could also say that about the Jesus record. So
Right. That's right. So I guess what I would kind of say, and this is also related to me being a teenager, as stripped back as Brothers Keeper is, as much as there's kind of an in the room feel to it, right? It's like, oh, I think I if you read the credits, you realize Jimmy Abeg played on enough instruments that it couldn't all be live, because like the guy can't be playing three instruments all at one time, which happens on some of the songs, different guitars, bass guitar or whatever, but nonetheless, there's a very intimate stripped back quality to it. As much as that's the case, there also is an incredibly intimate feel to Mullins's vocals. And I guess what I would say, this is my partial answer, is I felt like I was constantly coming back to this record because some of the lyrics are really inspirational and they lead you to God and they're very much about his faith. But other lyrics are mystical, they're mysterious, you don't quite know what they mean, like what are the breaks. These are the breaks, and you kind of go, I don't think, I'm just a kid, I don't think I understand this song. And I found myself coming back and just trying to be like, yeah, what hidden messages here is Mullins trying to tell us? So I did that, and I'm still pondering that. There's some parts of the album that I think I get more now, but there are still some songs that kind of remain mysterious, and I actually think that's the point, and that's probably one of the strengths of much of his lyrics is not just to like, here's the message, but you kind of sit there and you just like ponder, and you're like, yeah, what does this mean, or what is he trying to get us to think about at the very least? So, I mean, that's part of my fan experiences, and this is why it was so interesting to re-listen to it. Because there are some things I understand more now, but it's like, yeah, there's an intimacy to this record that I'm still unpacking all these years later.
did you buy it on CD or cassette?
I'm pretty sure I bought it on CD and not cassette, and I think this is my original copy. I picked up randomly another copy over the years, and it's just in a little slipcase. I just saw it once, and I was like, okay, I'll get an extra copy just to have it. But yeah, I got it on CD. I don't think I got it on cassette. I could be wrong, but I'm not sure. I think I was making the switch. I was making the transition at that time.
One of the things that you showed me before we started taping was
Yeah.
you have the songbook.
I have the songbook, which is crazy. It's crazy to think that the Christian music industry at this stage, they saw this as being lucrative enough. They thought, yeah, we'll make a songbook out of this, what is now kind of an obscure album. But here it is. And it's kind of irritating because I get irritated at stuff like this because it says medium range voice, which means that some of the keys are not the keys of the actual songs. And so you have to like sit there and figure out, oh no, they pitched it down like a couple of steps and you're like, oh, give me a break. So you can't actually play along with some of the songs like the way you want to. And there's some guitar parts here. Like this is all piano based. So if I want to learn some of, like, there's a really cool slide up on the song Brothers Keeper, like right in that pre-chorus. You can hear it in the song. That's not in here, but I could kind of piece it together. But I love the guitar tabs, show me how to play it on guitar. But whatever, it's still really cool to have. Apparently, you told me this goes for a lot of money on eBay. So please don't come into my house and steal this from me. I don't know.
Well, Chris, for this week's show, we're going to be presenting sort of alternate versions. We're not going to be playing the actual album tracks. We're going to play different versions of all the songs from the Brothers Keeper album, and we kind of dove into our archives and beyond. And we got some really cool stuff, and I'm going to kick things off with a couple of acoustic performances that Rich taped during an interview with Chris Fabry on Moody Radio's Open Line. And this, according to the Rich Mullins Timeline website, this was actually taped like right when the album came out in late July of 1995. So, of course, the first song is the title track, the song Brother's Keeper. And so, I think we'd all love it if you could just share some of your thoughts and reflections on the title track.
As the title track, Brother's Keeper, to me, isn't merely a song about loving the people in our lives with reserved judgment. I would say, instead, it's also a subtle manifesto for the ragamuffin paradigm, if you want to call it that. This would be a growing ethic of life for Mullins that really began taking shape after listening to, reading, and then finally meeting and being mentored by author Brendan Manning. Notice the clever device of the lyrics. All of the characters are struggling with the very things that should be their strengths. They are, perhaps shamefully, not living up to the titles and talents people know them for. Think of all the ways that we judge each other, and conversely, the ways we hide away, shielding ourselves from people's judgment. And then think about how much that causes us to not really live, to become shells of ourselves, putting on a front for the people around us, for fear of what they might think if they knew the true version of us. So here in this little 3-minute folk song, Mullins and Beaker offer us a way out. What if we all approached each other with an entirely transformed posture of heart? Let's be our brothers and our sisters' keepers. Let's help each other stand and then walk. Let's point to the truth, yes, whenever necessary, but oftentimes we're pointing so many fingers at ourselves and at others, we never end up quite getting to the lives God meant for us to live. Yep, we are these fallen, tarnished angels walking around paranoid and hurt. But what if God put us together to help each other fly? What would a community who commits to being each other's keepers actually look like? In an incredible way, this surprising little folk song invites us to ponder that together.
Now the plumber's got a drip in his spigot. The mechanic's got a clank in his car. And the preacher's thinking thoughts that are wicked. And the lover's got a lonely heart. My friends ain't the way I wish they were. They are just the way they are. I will be my brother's keeper, not the one who judges him. I won't despise him for his weakness, won't regard him for his strength. I won't take away his freedom, I will help him learn to stand. And I will be my brother's keeper. Now this roof has got a few missing shingles, but at least we got ourselves a roof. And they say that she's a fallen angel. Oh, I wonder if she recalls when she last flew. There's no point in pointing fingers unless you're pointing to the truth. I will be my brother's keeper, not the one who judges him. Won't despise him for his weakness, won't regard him for his strength. I won't take away his freedom, I will help him learn to stand. And I will be my brother's keeper.
I met Rich Mullins 3 times, all of them in various concert settings. I never had a real conversation with him, but I did get his autograph once. I then once had him awkwardly say, "Hey," to me, kind of sort of to me, before I left the backstage area in a tent at Cornerstone 1997, after realizing I wasn't in quite the right social situations, and being an awkward teenager, I quickly left and thought, oh, I really shouldn't be here. But I do remember Mark Robertson being there as well, right after This Train playing their set, and also Caedmon's Call, Derek Webb was there too. I wanted to say hello. I saw my hero. He looked very, very tan. He had a very leathery face at that point, and he didn't look like he wanted to talk to a goofy, awkward teenager who was probably a super fan. So I left. But at that same Cornerstone, I also got him to take a picture with me, and he put his arm around me, gave a massive smile for the picture. It was wonderful. Crazily enough, recently I sold the Caedmon's Call shirt I was wearing during that picture. Somebody wanted to buy it, a Rich Mullins fan and a friend of this podcast and show. So thanks a lot for that. And I'm happy to be able to contribute in that way. I guess now it's officially Mullins memorabilia, a shirt his hand had once rested on. But my whole life, I've been looking for a father figure. Someone to guide me through the brambles of life. Someone to give me hugs along the way and tell me things were going to be okay. And to keep going because things will get better. Throughout the mid-90s, Mullins was my parasocial version of a dad, and then he was gone. So, I spent the decades after his death scouring the fan sites and his written works for some kind of wisdom, some way of living in this troubled world as a troubled person. I know that Let Mercy Lead was written for Aidan, Beaker's son, but I liked to imagine that it was written for me. That the plaintive black and white Mullins on the album's cover was singing this song over me nightly, a blessing, an admonition, a commissioning into a life where each of my steps was filled with a drop of grace. Looking back on the song now, I see how it's filled with paradox. The way to live is to be foolish, like God, the God of ultimate wisdom. And that learning how to love actually means learning how to have your heart broken again and again, only to keep loving all the more. Finally, I can see that one of the greatest gifts a parent can offer to their child is not to control them or to tell them how to live, but to instead set them free and help them stand on their own. After all, it is mercy that we have to allow to lead us. I think, now that I'm in my 40s, older even than Mullins was when he died, that like Mullins and Beaker, it's up to me to give this gift of faith, of life, of letting mercy lead. It's time I sing this song over others.
Aidan, you're young, but Aidan, you're growing fast. And me and your mom, and all of the love we have. Can only take you so far, just as far as we can. But you'll need something more to guide your heart as you grow into a man. Let mercy lead, let love be the strength in your legs, and in every footprint that you leave there'll be a drop of grace. For we can reach beyond the wisdom of the sage into the foolishness of God. That foolishness will save those who believe. Although their foolish hearts may break, they will find peace. And I'll meet you in that place where mercy leads. And Aidan, the day will come. You'll run that race that takes us way beyond all our trials and all our failures and all the good we dream of. Well, you can't see yet where it is your headache. But one day you'll see face of love. Let mercy lead. Let love be the strength in your legs. And in every footprint that you leave, there'll be a drop of grace. For we can reach beyond the wisdom of the sage into the foolishness of God. That foolishness will save those who believe. Although their foolish hearts may break, they will find peace. And I'll meet you in that place where mercy leads. Let mercy lead. Let love be the strength in your legs. And in every footprint that you leave, there'll be a drop of grace. For we can reach beyond the wisdom of the sage. Through the foolishness of God, that foolishness will say, let mercy lead. Let mercy lead.
Well, that was Rich Mullins along with Beaker and a great live acoustic performance of their song Let Mercy Lead. And that's another one that was taped 30 years ago this month during an appearance on the Moody radio program Open Line. Well, right now, we've got something truly special for you. A while back, our friend Beth Snell-Lutz of Rich Mullins' early music was digging through some of her old tapes, and she found a series of demos that Rich recorded all the way back in 1989 for his album Never Picture Perfect. And one of the demos that was featured on that tape was an early recording of a song that 6 years later would finally be released on the Brothers Keeper album. I'm talking about the song Hatching of a Heart. Well, you know, this is a song that Rich actually began writing much earlier, possibly around 1984, if not earlier than that. And in 1987, he actually performed the song live on the Christian TV program Light Music, and that is an absolutely gorgeous rendition that's just Rich with his vocals and piano, but, you know, nothing else. This demo, however, that you're going to hear in just a few minutes, was recorded 2 years later with a couple of his friends in Wichita, Lee and Nikki Lundgren. Of course, Lee and Nikki are from the band Avenue G, who many of you may remember as a band that opened for Rich and played with him during many, many of his concerts in the late 80s and early 90s. And, you know, it is worth noting that both Lee and Nikki are featured on the Brothers Keeper album. And in fact, as Chris is going to mention in a little bit, they actually co-wrote one of the songs for that record. So, in just a moment, we're going to bring you, for the first time ever publicly, Rich Mullins and Avenue G's 1989 demo of Hatching of a Heart. But first, here's Chris again to share some thoughts on that song.
It certainly has a different sound than his previous albums, but I'm not sure why anyone ever complained about Brothers Keeper. To me, it feels both ahead of its time and a callback to the folk-tinged albums that were popular in the 70s, when Mullins was developing his songwriting chops and style as an artist. I wouldn't go so far as to say he invented Americana as a genre, but he was surely one of the first contemporary Christian music artists of the 90s to swing that door open wide, inviting others to come with him. Shirking the cheesy synth overtones plaguing many albums of that era, and setting aside the epic string-tinged production that Reed Arvin provided in his previous albums, Mullins here goes for the authentic and earthy, recorded with a live-in-the-studio feel. Less poppy and less single-worthy than the first two songs on the album, Hatching of the Heart is the first song making it truly obvious to the listener that Mullins was entering different territory with this work. Earthy, but no less focused on the winds of heaven, Hatching of the Heart features some of Mullins' densest lyrics. And I would add, the album as a whole contains some of his best lyrics, which is saying something. The songs on Brothers Keeper can somewhat be divided into thematic categories, and this is one of his coming to salvation songs. But what's interesting is that this to me is a middle-aged coming to faith. A renewed love for God discovered as one has aged a bit, and as a result, the renewal or hatching out of oneself. It's the kind of song that can only be written by someone after living some life and going through some things.
Well, the night was cold and my heart was hidden very safely in a shell. And I knew somehow I'd have to run my risk, have to open up myself. But you said, look at the stars on the face of the sky, they're the same ones that I saw. Well, come under my wing, will make you shine, to be strength enough to love. Now I'm getting strong enough, but you have to meet your my way out. Help me open myself up. So for the snow that comes with winter, and for the growth that comes with pain, and for the joke I can't remember, although the laughter all remains, and for the faith that brought the finish, all I doubted at the start. Lord, give you praise for all the names, the hatching of the heart. Well, my face was smooth and featureless, just like an egg. And if I was moved, you would never guess if I could look upon my face. But you said, man, it's without, but I look within, I can see the love you hide. And it's a matter of doubt, it's a symptom of sin, it's a problem of too much pride. Now I'm opening up wide, wet feathers fall out from beneath me, and you're teaching me to fly. So for the warmth that comes with friendship, and for the strength that comes with love, and for the love time can't diminish, and for the time love takes to grow, and for the moonlight on the river, for the bright morning star. Lord, I give you praise for all the maze, the hardship, and for the moonlight on the river, for the bright morning star. Lord, I give you praise for all the maze, the hardship of the heart.
Mullins said he had always wanted to record a country album, and Promenade is the song that most obviously comes closest to making that a reality. Being one of his Ragamuffin Brothers Keeper theme songs, it is interestingly the oldest composition on the album. Is it a true story? An allegory using an oppressive, overly moralistic community as a backdrop? A specific critique of American church culture? Or maybe, like so many songs on the album, it's about Mullins himself and how he overcame people's perceptions and judgments and learned to let loose a bit, to cut a rug on the dance floor and allow himself to be himself. But what I really want to know is, why did they decide to keep in that cough?
It's not the only country song I ever wrote, but it's one of two. And this is the other one. When the dancers took to the promenade, well, my heart leapt high. I was unafraid of the feeling I'd stifled for so many years. But tell me, how do you feel? Well, the band took their places and got all into, and then a caller's voice, well, it rang out beneath the moon. And then the boys took their curls and they started to reel, singing, how do you feel? And then the people in the town said that they'd call the police if we didn't keep down all this disturbing their peace. And Officer Black, you know saw this change coming over his face. Well, he was bouncing to the beat, started hopping on his heels, singing, how do you feel? Well, he danced for a while until he lost track of time, and then the reason he come back to his mind. So he turned in a flash, and he ran down the hill, singing, how do you feel? And then the townspeople asked him if he'd made some arrests. Would they find peace and quiet so they could go back to bed? He said, if it's peace that you want, you're gonna find it on the hill. But the silence that you keep, well, it's a thing that could kill you. So the townspeople all got so uptight and mad, you know, they fired him on the spot. And then they threw away his badge, and then they asked him to leave, and he said, gladly I will. They said, tell us now, how do you feel? And he said, when the dancers took to the promenade, well, my heart leapt high, and I was unafraid. Oh, the feeling I'd stifled for so many years. Well, tell me, how do you feel?
Well, that was an early live performance of a song from the Brothers Keeper album, the song Promenade. And you know, we actually have even earlier recordings of that particular song, but we chose the one that you just heard because that version is from the posthumous live Rich Mullins album that came out a few years ago, Deep Valley. And you know, that's an album that is really close to my heart, and I know it's close to Chris's too, because both Chris Marchand and I had the opportunity to serve as producers on that record. You know, we both really poured our hearts and souls into that project, and so we thought it might be meaningful to play that performance of Promenade on this 30th anniversary special celebrating Brothers Keeper. But it's also worth mentioning that that performance was taped 41 years ago this month, back in July of 1984. All right, well, in a moment, we're going to be playing the first of two songs in this episode that are from a tribute project that the Ragamuffins recorded, along with some friends, back in 2005. An album called Songs from Ben's House. And you know, that is a great record. I highly recommend checking it out. You can listen to the entire album on the Ragamuffin Archive YouTube channel. But the guy singing lead on this track, Phil Madeira, he can be heard playing all over the Brothers Keeper album, including on the original recording of this song, Wounds of Love. So in just a moment, we're going to have Phil Madeira's performance of that song for you. But first, before that, we've got Chris Marchand one more time with his reflections on Wounds of Love.
When you're 14 years old and your favorite musician releases a new album and there's a song on it with lyrics you don't understand, you just keep listening to that song over and over again, hoping the mystery will reveal itself, hoping some thread of meaning might unravel and make itself plain to you. And then, 2 years later, when that musician dies and you get older and you enter college and get a literature degree and you start getting jobs and then even start thinking you know a thing or two, well, you keep listening to that song you can never understand. But even then, it doesn't make much sense. Well, I'm glad I haven't listened to Brothers Keeper for a few years now because I think I actually get this song, Wounds of Love. To quote Mullins himself, if you love someone enough, it's going to leave some scars. I've been married for nearly 2 decades. I have 4 children. One of my parents has died, and the other will turn 80 in a few months. I've lost friends and faith communities and endured a lot on multiple fronts. Believe me, I have some stories. I imagine you do as well. To be alive means to get hurt. A lot. Just this week, I've had stuff happen to me that's torn me up on the inside. I'm left feeling guilty, like I've failed people for not doing enough, or for stepping my foot in a situation and making things worse. If you've lived enough of life too, you know how this goes. None of this being in relationships and trying to love people's stuff is easy. What I find most interesting about Wounds of Love as a song is I have no idea who it is for. There are a few clues, such as referring to Atlanta, that it's for someone specific. But even then, it's not clear if it's a bittersweet love song or if it's simply for a friend. But there's also a more universal reading, where Mullins wrote it for all of us, his fans, while out on the road during a long tour, hoping we're all right. And maybe the fact that we don't know who it's written to is the point. It keeps us guessing and helps us make peace with those ever-forming love scars, those beautiful wounds we'll always carry with us.
Oh gosh, man. Okay, we're on. 2, 3. Who's talking? I guess I can't be precious. Okay. 1, 2, 3. It's 1:15 tomorrow, 1:30 yesterday. The here and now done come and gone. Yeah, it's gone away. The moon over Atlanta winks, nods its head for a long good night. I don't know where you are, I don't know where you sleep, but I sure do hope that you're alright. And may the angel of his presence keep your heart when your prayers give flight to your dreams. May the scars you see on their wings be the wounds of love. Still full, ain't no one here to turn the tap. I wanna reach out and hold you, baby, but you're so far away, and I can't do that. The dark comes through these windows on the wind, makes these votives glow brilliantly. If passion can lead to prayer, maybe prayer can give us faith. And if faith is all we got, maybe faith is all we need. May the angel of his presence keep your heart when your prayers give flight to your dreams. May the scars you see on their wings be the wounds of love. Nods its head for a long good night. I don't know where you are, I don't know where you sleep, but baby, I sure do hope that you're alright. And may the angel of his presence keep your heart when your prayers give flight to your dreams. May the scars you see on their wings be the wounds of love. Yeah, the wounds of love be the wounds of love. Be the wounds of love.
Another of his salvation-themed songs, and another candidate for the most country-tinged song on the album, Damascus Road is notable for also being another one of his older songs, one documenting the end of a darker time in his life, perhaps the 10 years of struggle he often mentioned, that culminated in a renewed faith in the realization that God is his only source of hope and satisfaction in this world. The title and opening lyric is a reference to the Apostle Paul's turning away from the life of violence and oppression of the early church on the Damascus Road. But that's the only obvious reference to Paul in the song, with another possible reference later on to him, that is Mullins, being the prodigal son. The point being, Mullins draws on instances from Scripture as a metaphor to illuminate his own spiritual journey. The song ends with a cyclical eruption into worship and devotion, one that specifically describes Mullins' life calling. I'll give my life to sing your praise. Yes, this is the cry of every believer, everyone who professes faith in the triune God. But there seems to be something autobiographical going on here. At this turning point in his life, where he abandoned his sin and whatever vainglorious pursuits he now saw as filthy rags, he pledges to do the one thing it was clear God put him on earth to do: to sing God's praises all his life. And that's exactly what this song does in a kind of self-referential turn. It exemplifies the very thing Mullins declares, and in so doing, he calls all of us into worship with him.
I was on the road to Damascus. I was hung in the ropes of success. And you stripped away the mask of life that was placed upon the face of death. And I want to thank you, Lord, more than all of my words can say. I give my life, I give my life to sing your praise. And all those fortunes I hoarded, they were the wealth from which my poverty sprang. Oh, they led me to no greater glory, and they left me with no less shame. But when I finally found you, Lord, you took all those illusions away. I give my life, I give my life to sing your praise. I want to stay with you forever, Lord, don't let me go. Now that I know you, why would I ever want to go? I was on the road to Damascus. I was hung in the ropes of success. When you stripped away the mask of life they had placed upon the face of death. And I want to thank you, Lord, more than all of my words can say. I give my life, I give my life to sing your praise. My life to sing your praise. And beyond this, I would not beg for anything except the grace to give my life to sing your praise. And beyond this, I would not beg for anything except the grace to give my life to sing your praise.
Well, that was yet another early demo of a song that found its way onto the Brothers Keeper project, the song Damascus Road. And in fact, that demo was recorded 12 years earlier, back in 1983. And that was from a series of demos that Rich recorded that year with his longtime friend, Rick Blair. Now, to Rich Mullins fans, Rick Blair may be best remembered as the guy whose band, the Willoughby Wilson Band, first introduced Rich Mullins to the Dougie MacLean song, Ready for the Storm. And of course, Rich's 1988 cover of that song, it's kind of become a CCM classic. Well, Rich heard that song from Rick Blair, who helped Rich record the demo that you just heard. Well, in just a moment, we're going to be featuring our third and final performance from Rich Mullins' July 1995 appearance on Moody Radio's Open Line. And it's an absolutely beautiful solo rendition of the song Eli's Song. But first up, here's Chris Marchand to talk about that song.
The second of his child blessing songs on the album, Eli's Song, is co-written with Lee and Nikki Lundgren, whereas 6 of the album's songs are co-writes with his longtime writing partner Beaker, or David Strasser. To me, Eli's Song and the one that follows it are a glaring proof that Brothers Keeper is an underrated classic, showing the CCM industry didn't quite know how to handle it properly. Not only is Eli's Song an equally poignant, prayerful blessing over a child, as is Let Mercy Lead, but a few of the chord turns and accompanying vocal harmonies are some of the most beautiful in all of Mullins' oeuvre. It also features, as far as I can tell, the only time Mullins' hammered dulcimer makes an appearance on the album, and it's the first time he used that instrument with a more dreamy and lullaby-like quality, rather than the more typical manic and epic use of his iconic instrument. Anyway, to me, though understated and underrated like much of this album, Eli's Song is a Mullins classic.
Our guest tonight is Rich Mullins on Open Line, and here's a song from Brothers Keeper. It's the latest album. It's called Eli's Song. You're listening to Open Line. Don't call us this evening. This is a special broadcast with Rich Mullins.
Oh, Eli, there's a sanctity in your innocence, a certain beauty and no uncertain strength brings me to a faith I don't know if I am climbing to or falling in, but it shines like grace in your tiny hands. When I hold you in mine and I pray that the eyes of your heart shine bright with the hope to which you're called. May you know with all the saints, the height, the depth, the width and the length, the love of God. Oh, Eli, there's a joy in your sweet abandon, like the cowgirl ballerina leaves that ride, the wild and holy bucking wind that the sky sent through you to blow away these walls I've built, walls of selfishness and walls of guilt. Leave me free to be a child, and I pray that the eyes of your heart shine bright with the hope to which you're called. And may you know with all the saints, the height, the depth, the width and the length of the love of God. Cowgirl ballerina leaves that ride, the wild and holy bucking wind, to the sky.
So, along with containing a manifesto or two for ragamuffins, a few relationship songs, a handful of salvation songs, and a couple of blessings for children, I bet you didn't realize Brothers Keeper was also a worship album. But what is Cry the Name but another in a long line of unconventional worship songs from Mullins? I say unconventional because the verses of his worship songs take us in unexpected and even mystical, poetic directions, which often make for an odd pairing with his typically congregation-ready choruses. Think of Awesome God, Step by Step, and even Nothing is Beyond You. Or even Calling Out Your Name or The Color Green. They're all worship songs, if you think about them, begging to be sung in church, except for all the aspects of them that don't quite make them fully singable, at least not in a congregational setting. Well paired with Damascus Road, the other song on the album that's basically a worship song, I think Mullins is once again demonstrating how ahead of the curve he was. It's fascinating how, in the late 90s and almost up to the present day, the Christian industry became taken with worship songs, as if they were a novel form of worship no one had ever thought of before. But here Mullins was putting out worship songs and hymns on basically every album, and doing so right from the beginning, starting with Sing Your Praise to the Lord from Behold the Man with Zion. Cry the Name is a great Ragamuffin Band song as well, with everyone firing on all cylinders. Again, it strikes me that this song could have been so much more well-known and beloved had people not felt like Mullins was throwing them some kind of curveball with this album. But here you go. Please enjoy this country root folk Americana Celtic tinged, straight up pastoral and mystical devotional worship song that no one can really sing in church, even though they can, if they wanted to.
This is a song off the new album. It's called Cry the Name.
Another great live performance for you right there. That was Rich Mullins and a Ragamuffin band performing the song Cry the Name. And that was from their November 19th, 1995 stop in Toledo, Ohio, as part of the Brothers Keeper tour. All right, well, in just a moment, we're going to feature yet another Brothers Keeper song from the 2005 tribute album, Songs from Ben's House. The song, The Breaks. And this one is going to feature on lead vocals one of the founding members of a Ragamuffin band, the late, great Rick Elias. Now, it is no secret that Rick was a big fan of this song. In fact, Rick Elias actually started covering this song, The Breaks, before Rich Mullins died. And years later, shortly before Rick Elias died, this was the only track from the Brothers Keeper album that he shared online as part of this kind of huge digital archive of recordings that he considered to be among his greatest work. So I thought it seemed appropriate to feature Rick's cover of this song during our 30th anniversary special. But before we hear that, here's Chris Marchand with some thoughts on The Breaks.
I'm not sure if I have much to say about The Breaks. Maybe I'm not old enough to understand it yet. I don't know. Talk to me in 20 years. But one thing I can say is I feel the Southwest over all these songs. They make me think of canyons and rocks and sparse vegetation. You can hear the wind blowing through them, and it's significantly different from the prairie winds and Appalachian winds you can hear on previous albums. A Southwestern aesthetic most prominently permeates the album artwork and photography by Ben Pearson, Jimmy Abegg, and Diana Lucendon. It's actually surprising to learn the album was recorded in Nashville. If you had told me they had set up their equipment in Mullins' trailer or yet-to-be-built Hogan in Window Rock, I wouldn't have batted an eye. Whoever he's singing to in this song, and whatever heartbreak and hope he's trying to capture for them, I sure do hope they heard it one day.
1, 2, 3. Sorry. Here is my heart. Take what you want. Cause I have no use for it anyway. Well, of all of the stupid things I've ever said, this could be the worst, it may be the best, but those are the breaks, and these are the bruises. If I can't give myself away, I'm the only one who loses. And I don't want to lose it. It is the sea that makes the sailor, and the land that shapes the sea. I do not know yet what I'm made of, or all I may someday be. It is the wood that makes the carpenter. It's the very tools of its trade. It is love that makes a lover, a cross that makes a saint. Here is my song, listen if you will. But I have no heart for it anymore. I
always have half a mind to cut it loose. And if it sails off into the blue, I'll just let it soar. And the sky's better for keeping. And I won't be any poorer for giving it its freedom. And here's one for freedom. It is the sea that makes the sailor, and the land that shapes the sea. And I do not know yet what I'm made of, or all I may someday be. And it is the wood that makes the carpenter. It's the very tools of his trade. It is love that makes a lover, and a cross that makes a saint. Of the stupid things I've ever said, this could be the worst, it may be the best, but those are the breaks, these are the bruises. And if I can't give myself away, I'm the only one who loses. I don't want to lose this. It is the sea that makes a sailor, and the land that shapes the sea. And I do not know yet what I'm made of, or all I may someday be. And it is the wood that makes the carpenter. It's the very tools of his trade. It is love that makes a lover, and the cross that makes a saint.
I love Mullins' scripture songs. For me, there's no one who could weave together the narratives and themes of the Bible in a more compelling fashion. He simultaneously managed to drop us right into the lives of the people contained in those ancient books, while also helping us see that their lives are our lives. We're all just striving to figure out how to live in this place we find ourselves, and to connect with God, the maker of all, while we do it. Quoting Deuteronomy to the Devil concludes, and thus Mullins' last proper album during his lifetime concludes, with the most compelling, open-ended, hope-filled, though still a tad bit ominous assertion. There's a coming of glory. There's a coming of wrath. There's some mighty things a-comin'. Lord, they're comin' to pass. I don't know what Mullins saw out there on that horizon. I don't know what he felt was coming, but I imagine he knows now, and someday, I hope I will too.
From a concert taped in Anderson, Indiana, back on November 16th, 1995, as part of the Brothers Keeper tour. That was Rich Mullins and a Ragamuffin band doing the closing song of the Brothers Keeper album, quoting Deuteronomy to the devil. Great song right there. And Chris, I'm assuming that you actually got to hear Rich play that song because you actually saw him, along with Carolyn Aarons, Ashley Cleveland, and the Ragamuffins, on the Brothers Keeper tour. So why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, I don't remember the exact date, but it was a Peoria, Illinois stop. I'm going to guess it was October 24th or October 25th, something like that. We could go back, and it was a Friday night. And I have to say, it was somewhat of an irritating experience because I was a freshman in high school and I was on the freshman football team. And you know what? People are real jerks because they always schedule their high school football games for Friday nights. Can you believe it? And so here I was, a freshman, and I was rushing to get out of there. I was who cares about this stupid football game? I got to get to Rich Mullins. So I was kind of irritated. When we got there, we were like 10, 15 minutes late. Right. So that's what I was irritated with, that stress of like, I'm going to be late. I'm going to be late. I'm going to be late. Like, maybe that was one of the reasons I was like, I can't do this football thing anymore. So anyway, I didn't play anymore after that, after that season. Now, what's weird about the live experience is it wasn't in an arena and it wasn't in a theater. I don't know who made those decisions at the time, but they put him in an assembly hall, which is like this. I mean, at our local place, we have a sports arena, which has, a big venue. We have a proper theater, which I did see him and Mitch play in about a year later. They played the theater. They came back and played the theater. I saw him there as well. But they put him in a big assembly hall, which is where they put car shows, and they put like other like little fan festivals and things like that. So it was a kind of a strange venue.
So kind of like a little convention center kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like they set them up, 700, 500 chairs in a big convention center, flat concrete space, big old box of a room, And it was full. I mean, as far as I know, I couldn't say it was sold out, but it was a lot of people there. And I think one of my memories is I knew who Carolyn Aarons was at that time. I knew who Ashley Cleveland was, and I'm pretty sure as I arrived, one of them was playing, right? And so that was really neat. Also, we can talk about this at another time in terms of like if you would have quizzed me and said, "Hey, was Mark Robertson playing on Brothers Keeper?" I would have said, well, of course he was. What are you talking about? Like, I would have gotten it wrong because there's something that it feels like that Mark Robertson was there. I think Mark Robertson was there that night playing in the band.
Yeah, he was on the tour.
Okay, good. Like you're making me second guess myself. Like all these like kind of funny facts. I could have also sworn, and I could be wrong, but I think Mitch played a song or two, like backup acoustic guitar. My problem is when I think of the stage, it was like they were just packing it with people. So I think if this is one of these tours where Mullins was like, hey, I want everybody up here. I want everybody playing. And so that's kind of one of my memories is like there was just so many people on that stage.
Just out of curiosity, do you have any specific memory of whether or not Rick Elias was there?
Yes. There had to be a guy that I now look back on and go, that was Rick Elias. But I could be wrong.
Well, the only reason I ask is I could be mistaken over this, so forgive me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that Rick missed a handful of dates on that tour.
Okay.
Because he was out in Hollywood working on That Thing You Do.
So listen. Memories are weird things. I like to imagine that he was there. So let's pretend, shall we? I'm sure there's going to be some super fan who can let us know.
We're just saying that he was there.
He was there. Do you know what's funny about this particular concert? I could be wrong, but there's a story that got told where Mullins went on a run beforehand, and he really enjoyed the run, but he got lost. He got lost, and it made him late for the concert, or like right up to the last minute. Have you ever heard that story? This happened at this concert.
Oh, really? Because I've heard that with the Lufkin concert.
Maybe so. You know how everyone gets these things wrong. Some people say no. He wrote Hard to Get after after meeting with me.
Yeah.
Like maybe this is our version of that. I swear he got lost in Peoria, Illinois that night. October.
I mean, in fairness, there are more than one story of Rich getting lost before a concert, and I'm not even kidding.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
can pull up at least a couple stories that I've heard over the years. So that may have just been a regular occurrence.
Maybe so. Yeah, yeah. So there you go. I mean, I don't have a huge amount of memories. I mean, I struggle with this actually. I do struggle with specific memories. I do remember afterward there was a line, an autograph line, and that's where I stood in line and I got an autograph copy of Never Picture Perfect. And my mom, she said, "Rich," or whatever she said. She was like, "On behalf of us parents, thank you for being there and setting it." My mom gave like this inspirational speech to Rich Mullins, and I could tell he kind of had, he kind of gave this look of like,
Like for
lady,
being like a good example to teenagers.
yeah, for being a good example.
Did he immediately then invite you out for a smoke after she said
No,
that?
yeah, right, exactly. He did look at her kind of like, "Lady, I'm nobody's example." Like he didn't say it, but he kind of his face said it. And I was like, Mom, stop. Like, before she embarrasses me too much in front of my hero. But he signed it. He said, "Be gods." I mean, goodness gracious, he says "be gods" on his autographs. Of course, there's that conflicting nature of, I think he is an example. But then there's the other side, which is like, well, he had some hangups and he wasn't necessarily the perfect mentor for everybody. So, but anyway, that was my experience. I still have the autograph CD, and yeah.
Did you get a T-shirt or anything?
No, I didn't. I didn't get a T-shirt. You know what I did? Here's the thing. You mentioned like what was my experience of listening to Brothers Keeper. It was at this moment where I was like starting to fill in my back catalog of albums I didn't have. So I had never heard the self-titled original album. I had never heard Pictures in the Sky. I knew some of the songs, some of the individual songs. So I got Never Picture Perfect because it's like, oh, I've never seen that album before. I didn't have a copy of that, so I scooped that one up, if that makes sense. So that's what I got there was the CD. Yeah.
I started, if it means anything to you, I started Ragamuffin Archive about 6 years before I ever finally got a copy of those first two albums.
There you go. Yeah, they're hard to find. They were hard to find.
Yeah.
So and this, and I grew up with Winds of Heaven, Stuff of Earth. Like that was like one of my first ever albums that was around in my family. But Never Picture Perfect, I never seen that. I imagine it was available somewhere, but it's not like you could just go out and buy. There was not a lot of places to get albums in those days.
Well, I've listened to the record 2 or 3 times this week, just in preparation for this. And one thing that really did kind of strike me is, doing the archive and just kind of like, kind of getting into that world of Rich Mullins bootlegs and concert recordings and demos and all that. I guess I've become much more acquainted with that as sort of being the Rich Mullins sound, that very raw, very acoustic, stripped down version of Mullins. And I will say that I do think if we're going to look at that and we're going to go, well, that is Rich Mullins in his purest form, right? That is the Rich Mullins sound. Brothers Keeper is probably the album that does come the closest to that.
Yeah, it's a strange thing. I would happen to agree. And you and I were in our various back and forth this week. We're like, oh man, if only we could have 2 or 3 more albums just like this, right? I like the Reed Arvin sound. In fact, I might prefer it. At the same time, boy, there was a couple of more decades worth of albums like this that we didn't get a chance to hear, So, if only. And who knows? Maybe like other artists, maybe the fact that we have less of their works to draw from, maybe that makes us love them better, right? Maybe it makes them more dear to our hearts. I don't know.
Well, and that's the thing, I think it's it's very possible to to appreciate more than one sound. I've gone to bat for the Jesus record like more times than I can count because, how many times have you heard over the years somebody say, "Wow, that record is overproduced. It doesn't sound like Rich Mullins," and it's like, well. Okay, but Rich didn't get to make it. But Rick Elias was going to produce that record regardless. That may very well be how that record sounded. And it's not all that far different, say, from like, The World Is Best, volume 1 and 2. Those are pretty overproduced tracks, and that's not a bad thing. I happen to love The Wall of Sound, you can say a lot of things about Phil Spector, but I do love that really layered sound where there's a lot there and it just has that big full sound. A lot of people don't love that, and it's kind of sort of become, it hasn't aged well, I guess, to a lot of people, but man, I still love that. And so I love a big overproduced record, but I also love a nice stripped back record too.
Sure.
And so it is what it is. Brothers Keeper is kind of it's an odd duck in that it is sort of, like for what it is, it's Rich Mullins' last album. It is the last Rich Mullins album to be released in his life. And everybody, I think, sort of kind of looks at the Jesus record and maybe even to a bigger extent those demos as being Rich's final work. But yeah, as a songwriter, yes. As a recording artist, no. That's simply not the case. Love it or hate it, Brothers Keeper. It is the last Rich Mullins record, and it doesn't really get the discussion I think it deserves for that reason alone.
Yeah, I think it's okay to put Brothers Keeper into the realm of it's a classic album. Like it's one of his greatest works. And the struggle with that is it's not one of his epic works because we think of like, we need the epic dulcimer of calling out your name with the orchestra behind him. And then there's the choir and stuff. It's like, no, it's not that. But have you heard Eli's song? Like, have you heard the chord progression in that song? And it's just so gorgeous and lush that like in some ways like a little song like that people never talk about should be up there with one of his greatest, along with Damascus Road and Crying Out Your Name.
And that's another good example of
Try the Name.
But it's another good example too of what we were just talking about in that like the song is so lush and beautiful on the album, and yet the version we just played was just Rich sitting down at the piano, and it's just as beautiful.
Yeah,
but entirely different.
Yeah. That's another weird thing about some of the songs on Brothers Keeper is the alternate versions of them, like that are kind of surprising. Like, the way that he was changing how he saw the song, or when he brought it to the band, they reimagined it together. And so therefore we just kind of get these different versions. I kind of find that fascinating. Yeah. Oh, I will say this. There are a couple of songs on Brothers Keeper that when I heard them, I heard how they could be ruined as a 1980s like track. Like I could see like if these had come along, I'm thinking specifically Hatching of a Heart and quoting Deuteronomy to the devil. I was like, oh man, they would have butchered that in 1986 or 87, putting some synths on there, just trying to give it a cool feel. But I'm so glad they were able to flesh it out with real instruments as a band, So I don't know. To me, there's a few songs on there that really could have not found their best version if they had, been recorded about 6 years earlier.
Well, I think that's about going to wrap things up for this week. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Our 100th episode, a 30th anniversary celebration of the Brothers Keeper album. Thank you, Chris, for being here and for co-hosting with me. Before we go, did you have any kind of just final thoughts on Brothers Keeper?
I hope that I've come to the place in life where we all have so little control over anything. And if we could just have like, in this moment in time, you and I just go, hey, remember this album? It's pretty good, right? Like I'll just be grateful for that because it really is good. It's really, anyway, you don't need to hear it from us. Just go listen to it.
All right. Well, thanks, Chris. And thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time. You've been listening to a special presentation of Ragamuffin Archive Revisited, a 30th anniversary celebration of Brothers Keeper. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to follow us on social media. It's Ragamuffin Archive on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and X. And you can reach me by email at ragamuffinarchive@gmail.com. You can also subscribe to this podcast on Mixcloud. The song you're hearing is Screen Porch by Ted Yoder. You can hear more of his music at tedyoder.com or on Bandcamp. I'm Joe Cook, hoping you'll join us next time for another deep dive into the archive. Thanks for listening.